Welcome to About the House. International agreements affect all Australians on different levels, whether it's as simple as getting a visa for an overseas holiday or entering complex importing business deals. Australia seeks to enter treaties that are in the best interest of its citizens. But before Australia can ratify international agreements, the Parliament's Joint Standing Committee on Treaties, otherwise known as JSCOT, must scrutinise the agreements and make recommendations to the Parliament. This process has only been in place since 1996, and this year a series of celebratory events are being held to mark 20 years of JSCOT. Foreign Minister and former JSCOT Chair, the Hon Julie Bishop MP, says the committee's work has important consequences.
I think the establishment of JSCOT was one of the most significant foreign policy initiatives of the Howard government, in that it brought a transparency and an accountability to the treaty making process in Australia. And I think that JSCOT plays a very important role, indeed a vital role, in our foreign policy, the embrace of treaties into our domestic legislation. And the International Criminal Court, again, is a great example of that, where the International Criminal Court was set up as a global entity to investigate and prosecute war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity. And as a result, these crimes are now embedded in Australian law, so they have very important consequences.
The 20-year anniversary of the committee included a special event at Parliament House. The one-day seminar titled In Our Best Interest, Treaty Scrutiny in a Connected World brought together politicians, public servants and academics to reflect on the role of JSCOT. Seminar presenter and human rights lawyer Professor Pene Mathew says her opinions about the committee have changed since 1996.
I was a bit sceptical about the need for JSCOT at the beginning, and that's what I said in my talk. All of this talk about a democratic deficit, as a human rights lawyer, what I was really keen to see was people's rights protected and therefore Australia participating. So I was a bit unsure about this idea that we needed more scrutiny. I wanted Australia to become party, and I was very well aware that the United States had a rule about getting 2/3 advice and consent from the Senate, and that often they don't become party to human rights treaties as a result. So, for example, they're the only UN member state not to become party to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So it was more I was sceptical about also what's this democratic deficit and so on, and is it just going to hold us up from becoming party to these valuable treaties? And then, as we've witnessed the rise of free trade agreements, I've now begun to have those same concerns, that actually these are very wide-ranging treaties with all sorts of impacts on the domestic jurisdiction, and that there certainly is a role for Parliament and the public to have some input into what is at the end of the day a law. It's an international law, obviously, but it's law, and there should be some robust debate around that.
Professor Ben Saul from the University of Sydney says the seminar was also an opportunity for discussion on how international agreements have changed in the last 2 decades and what this could mean for the future of the committee.
Certainly there's been a change in the treaty, in the kinds of treaties which have been negotiated in recent years. I mean, many of the large set-piece multilateral governance arrangements have already been made and are now pretty well settled in many areas. So instead there's a proliferation of bilateral treaties which raise their own set of issues, but also a whole lot of, as you say, less than treaty status instruments, memoranda of understanding and so on. Things which are really convenient for governments to enter into because they're flexible and they don't have to go through the same kind of scrutiny and approval processes as treaties. So there's a huge incentive for governments to enter into them. They also are off the radar of public scrutiny, and so there's less kind of political pressure which is brought to bear on those processes. And of course there are good reasons for that kind of flexibility in some cases, but there's at the same time a pretty acute public interest in knowing what we're getting in for, knowing what our government is signing us up to, knowing the content of it, having them published, because at the moment they're often not publicly available, so that we know what direction our foreign relations is going in, and we can have some influence on shaping where it goes down the track.
You can find out more about the work of JSCOT and watch presentations and panel sessions from the 20th anniversary event at aph.gov.au/JSCT.